Ryan and I had always been close. We met in college, where our shared love for late-night pizza runs and marathon gaming sessions forged an unshakable bond. Over the years, our friendship became more like family. He was the guy I could trust with anything. Naturally, when Lauren mentioned she wanted to get in shape but was too intimidated to join a gym, Ryan was the first person I thought of. "You know I'd be happy to help," Ryan had said with that easy grin of his when I brought it up over drinks one evening. "I've been coaching clients for years. I'll take it slow with her, make sure she feels comfortable." His offer felt like a win-win. Ryan got to show off his training skills, and Lauren got the help she needed from someone I trusted implicitly. What could go wrong? At first, everything seemed perfect. Lauren came home from their sessions energized, her cheeks flushed with the kind of enthusiasm I hadn't seen in months. "Ryan's amazing at this," she'd gush, tossing her gym bag onto the couch. "He really knows how to push me without overdoing it." I was thrilled for her. She'd been in a funk lately, feeling like she'd lost her spark. Seeing her so motivated felt like a breath of fresh air for both of us. And Ryan? He was doing me a huge favor, asking for nothing in return. I felt grateful and didn't think twice about it. But as the weeks went on, little things started to bother me. Lauren's workouts, which had started as a manageable 3 times a week, had suddenly increased to almost daily. She'd come home later than expected, brushing it off with explanations about extended cooldowns or chats with Ryan about fitness plans. "You should come with us sometime," Lauren suggested one evening. "Ryan keeps saying you'd enjoy it." I nodded absent-mindedly but didn't commit. The truth was, I'd been letting myself go lately. Work had taken over, and the idea of embarrassing myself in front of Ryan and Lauren wasn't exactly appealing. Still, her suggestion stuck in my mind. Maybe joining them would be a good way to reconnect, not just with Lauren, but with Ryan too. One Saturday, I finally decided to take the plunge. I dusted off my old gym shoes and joined them for a morning session. Ryan greeted me like he always did, his grin wide and welcoming. "Glad to see you're finally taking her advice," he teased, clapping me on the back. "Let's see what you've got." The workout was brutal. Ryan led us through a circuit that left me gasping for air, while Lauren breezed through the exercises like a pro. She'd improved so much, and I couldn't help but feel proud of her. But as I caught my breath between sets, I noticed something that set my nerves on edge. Ryan's attention to Lauren seemed excessive. He was constantly by her side, adjusting her form with light touches on her shoulders or waist, offering encouragement with an intensity that felt a little too personal. And Lauren? She seemed almost giddy, her laughter ringing out in a way that made my stomach twist. I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was overreacting. Ryan was a professional. This was his job, and Lauren had every reason to be happy. She was making progress, after all. But the feeling lingered, gnawing at the edges of my mind. Over the next few weeks, I joined them for a few more sessions, hoping to dispel my doubts. Instead, they grew. I began noticing more little things. The way their conversations were peppered with inside jokes I didn't understand. The way Ryan's eyes lingered on Lauren just a second too long. It wasn't overt, but it was enough to make my chest tighten. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I'd taken the day off to catch up on errands. As I drove past the gym, a thought struck me. Why not surprise Lauren and Ryan? I'd been feeling out of the loop, and maybe seeing them in action without the pressure of participating would put my mind at ease. When I arrived, the gym was quiet, the usual hum of activity replaced by the occasional clink of weights. I spotted them in the far corner, working on stretches. At first glance, it seemed innocent enough. Ryan was helping Lauren with a hamstring stretch, his hands placed lightly on her hips as she bent forward. But as I watched, something about the scene made my skin crawl. Their movements were fluid, synchronized in a way that felt less like a trainer and client and more like something else. Lauren laughed at something Ryan said, her face glowing with a kind of joy I hadn't seen in a long time. And then there was the way his hand lingered just a little too long before letting go. I approached them, my steps deliberate. "Hey," I said, my voice cutting through the air. Both of them jumped, their expressions shifting in an instant. Lauren's cheeks flushed as she straightened up, and Ryan's usual grin faltered. "Chris," Lauren exclaimed, her tone overly cheerful. "What are you doing here?" I thought I'd check in, I said, forcing a smile. Got the day off, so I figured why not stop by? Ryan recovered quickly, slapping me on the back. Good timing, he said, his grin returning. We were just wrapping up. Want to join us for a quick cool down? Maybe next time, I replied, my eyes flicking between the two of them. They both seemed flustered, their usual camaraderie replaced by a tension that set my nerves on edge. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every interaction I'd witnessed at the gym replayed in my mind, each moment taking on a new, more sinister meaning. Was I imagining things? Or was there really something going on between my wife and my best friend? Lauren had gone to bed early, claiming exhaustion, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was avoiding me. As I lay awake in the dark, the weight of my suspicions pressed down on me. I needed answers, and if they weren't going to give them to me willingly, I'd find them myself. The morning after my surprise visit to the gym, I woke up feeling like a stranger in my own home. Lauren moved through her morning routine with a practiced ease, her demeanor as cheerful as ever. But to me, it felt like a performance, a carefully constructed facade designed to keep me from asking too many questions. Did you sleep well? She asked, handing me a cup of coffee. Not really, I replied, my voice neutral. Kept thinking about yesterday. Her smile faltered for just a second before she recovered. Oh, what about it? I shrugged, taking a sip of coffee. Just trying to figure out how you've managed to stick with these workouts. They're brutal. She laughed, but it sounded hollow. It's all thanks to Ryan. He's been such a great motivator. Her words landed like a punch to the gut, though I couldn't pinpoint why. I forced a smile and nodded, but the unease in my chest only grew. That afternoon, I decided to take matters into my own hands. If there was nothing going on, I'd confirm it and move on. But if there was, I needed to know. I started by checking Lauren's phone while she was in the shower. I hated myself for it, but the need for answers outweighed my guilt. Her messages were mundane, conversations with friends, work reminders, and the occasional exchange with Ryan. Nothing incriminating. But then I saw a message thread between her and Ryan that was unusually long, filled with workout schedules, banter, and photos of meal prep. One message, in particular, stood out. Ryan, you're doing amazing. I'm so proud of you. Can't wait for the next session. Lauren, thanks. Couldn't have done it without you. The emoji wasn't overt, but it was enough to make my blood boil. I put her phone back and spent the rest of the day trying to focus on work, but my thoughts kept drifting. Every moment they'd spent together, every glance, every laugh. It all felt like pieces of a puzzle I couldn't quite put together. By the time Lauren came home that evening, I was a ball of nerves. Hey, you okay? She asked, setting her gym bag down. Yeah, I said, forcing a smile. Just tired. She didn't press further, but her eyes lingered on me for a moment before she headed to the shower. I watched her go, my chest tightening with a mix of anger and doubt. The next morning, I called Ryan. Hey man, I said, trying to keep my tone light. I was thinking about coming to the gym again. Maybe tomorrow? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Yeah, sure, Ryan said finally. Lauren mentioned you'd been thinking about joining more regularly. She did. I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. Yeah, he said. She's been really into it lately. You should definitely come along. His enthusiasm felt forced, and it only added to my suspicions. When I showed up at the gym the next day, the tension was palpable. Lauren and Ryan greeted me with their usual smiles, but there was an undercurrent of unease in their interactions. During the workout, I noticed the same patterns. Ryan standing too close, his hands lingering a beat too long, their laughter just a little too intimate. But it wasn't just their behavior, it was Lauren's body language. The way she seemed hyper-aware of me, glancing over her shoulder as if worried I'd catch something I wasn't supposed to see. By the time the session ended, I was seething. I needed more than just suspicion. I needed proof. The following week, I came up with a plan. I told Lauren I had an early meeting and wouldn't be able to join her at the gym. Instead, I parked my car a block away and waited. It didn't take long for them to arrive, laughing as they walked into the building together. I followed them inside, keeping my distance. The gym was mostly empty, the sound of weights clinking and treadmills humming filling the air. I watched from a corner as Ryan led Lauren through their usual warm-up, his hands brushing against her more often than seemed necessary. After about 20 minutes, they disappeared into the locker room area. My stomach twisted as I debated what to do. I knew I couldn't let this go on any longer. I waited a few minutes before making my move, walking briskly toward the locker rooms. My heart pounded in my chest as I pushed open the door, the smell of sweat and disinfectant hitting me like a wave. At first, the room seemed empty. Then I heard it. Hushed voices, laughter, and the unmistakable sound of movement. I followed the noise to a row of lockers at the back, my pulse racing with every step. And then I saw them. Ryan was standing too close, his hand resting on Lauren's waist. She was laughing softly, her head tilted toward him. They hadn't noticed me yet, too engrossed in whatever conversation they were having. But the intimacy between them was undeniable. "Really?" I said, my voice cutting through the air like a knife. They both jumped, their faces draining of color as they turned to face me. Lauren's eyes widened in shock, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find the right words. Ryan took a step back, his hands raised defensively. "Chris, it's not what it looks like," Lauren said quickly, her voice trembling. "Then what is it?" I snapped, my anger boiling over. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've both been lying to me." Ryan tried to interject. "Man, listen." "No," I said sharply, pointing a finger at him. "I trusted you. You were supposed to be my friend." He looked down, his expression filled with something that might have been regret, or maybe just guilt at getting caught. "Chris, please," Lauren said, stepping forward. "Let me explain." "Explain?" I said, my voice cracking with emotion. "You want to explain why the two people I trusted most decided to betray me?" The weight of it all was crushing, the anger and pain swirling into something I couldn't contain. Without waiting for an answer, I turned and walked out, their voices calling after me as I left. I drove aimlessly after leaving the gym, my knuckles white on the steering wheel as the betrayal replayed in my mind. Lauren's wide-eyed shock, Ryan's stammered denials. It all blurred together in a haze of anger and disbelief. I couldn't go home, not yet. The thought of facing Lauren, of hearing more excuses, made my stomach churn. After what felt like hours, I found myself parked at a quiet overlook on the outskirts of town. The city lights twinkled below, indifferent to the chaos tearing through me. For the first time since catching them, the anger gave way to something heavier. Sadness. How had it come to this? Ryan wasn't just a friend. He was family. He was the guy who'd stood by me through everything, from college exams to my wedding day. And Lauren, she was supposed to be my partner, my forever. Now, the two people I'd trusted most had shattered my world. My phone buzzed in the cup holder, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was Lauren. Her name flashing on the screen made my chest tighten, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. She called again, and again. Each time, I let it ring out, her increasingly frantic texts piling up in the notifications. "Lauren, Chris, please come home. We need to talk." "Lauren, I can explain. It's not what you think." "Lauren, please, just come home." "I'm so sorry." Her words only fueled the fire inside me. What could she possibly say that would make this better? I tossed my phone onto the passenger seat and leaned back, closing my eyes against the ache in my chest. When I finally returned home late that night, the house was dark except for the dim glow of the living room lamp. Lauren was sitting on the couch, her face pale and tear-streaked. She stood as I walked in, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Chris," she began, her voice trembling. "Thank God you're home. I was so worried." I didn't respond, dropping my keys onto the counter and leaning against the edge of the kitchen island. "Start talking," I said coldly. She flinched at my tone but nodded. "It's not what it looked like," she said quickly. "Ryan and I, there's nothing going on." "Don't insult me," I snapped, my voice rising. "I saw the way he touched you, the way you laughed with him. That wasn't nothing." Tears welled in her eyes, and she took a step closer. "I know how it looked," she said, her voice breaking. "But I swear, Chris, I never meant for it to get this far. Ryan was just, He was there for me when I felt like you weren't." Her words hit like a slap, and I stared at her, my chest tightening. "So this is my fault?" I asked, my voice laced with bitterness. "You're blaming me for what you did?" "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. "I'm not blaming you. I take full responsibility for my actions. But you've been so distant lately, so wrapped up in work. I felt invisible." "Invisible?" I repeated, my voice cracking with emotion. "And instead of talking to me, you decided to turn to my best friend?" Lauren broke down, her sobs filling the room. "I'm so sorry," she choked out. "I know I've hurt you. I know I've betrayed your trust. But I love you, Chris. I never stopped." Her words twisted the knife in my chest, and I turned away, unable to look at her. "You don't do this to someone you love," I said quietly. "You don't lie to them, betray them, and then expect them to forgive you." The room fell silent, her sobs the only sound. I wanted to lash out, to scream, to demand answers to questions I wasn't even sure I wanted answered. But the weight of it all was suffocating, and I couldn't find the words. "I need space," I said finally, my voice cold and distant. "I can't be here right now." "Chris, please," Lauren begged, reaching for me. "Don't leave. We can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes." I stepped back, her touch like fire against my skin. "I don't know if we can fix this," I said honestly. "And right now, I can't even think about trying." Her face crumpled, and I turned away, grabbing my keys and walking out the door. As I drove away, her cries echoed in my mind, a painful reminder of the life we'd built, and the cracks that had destroyed it. I ended up at a motel on the edge of town, the kind of place where anonymity was guaranteed. The room was small and sparsely furnished, but it offered the one thing I needed most: solitude. I sat on the bed, staring at the wall as the reality of what had happened settled over me like a heavy fog. The betrayal wasn't just about the physical act. It was about the lies, the secrets, the breaking of trust that I'd thought was unshakable. And Ryan, the thought of him made my blood boil. How could he? He knew Lauren was my world, and he'd taken advantage of that. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Ryan. "Ryan, Chris, I'm sorry. Can we talk? Please. It's not what you think." I threw the phone onto the bed, unable to bring myself to respond. The thought of facing him, of hearing more excuses, made my stomach turn. As the hours passed, my anger burned itself out, leaving only exhaustion in its wake. I lay back on the bed, staring at the cracked ceiling as the weight of the situation pressed down on me. The road ahead felt impossibly long, filled with questions I didn't know how to answer. But one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same. The next morning, I woke up in the motel room, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on me. My head throbbed, not from alcohol or lack of sleep, but from the relentless churn of emotions. My phone was on the nightstand, screen lit up with an overwhelming number of missed calls and messages. Most were from Lauren, but Ryan's name was there too, glaring at me like a wound I couldn't ignore. I stared at the screen for a long time before finally unlocking it. Scrolling through Lauren's messages was painful. Pleas to come home, apologies laced with desperation, and promises to explain everything. But it was Ryan's messages that turned my stomach. "Ryan, Chris, I know you're furious, and you have every right to be. Please let me explain. Ryan, I'm sorry. For everything. Please just give me a chance to talk to you." Reading his words felt like pouring salt on an open wound. Ryan, my closest friend, the one person I thought would never betray me, had not only crossed a line but obliterated it. And now he wanted a chance to explain? To what? Justify his actions. My hands shook as I set the phone down, my anger bubbling to the surface. By afternoon, I couldn't put it off any longer. I needed answers, not for him but for myself. I dialed Ryan's number, my chest tightening with each ring. When he picked up, his voice was cautious. "Chris," he said, almost as though he were testing the waters. "We need to talk," I said, my tone clipped. "Yeah, we do," he replied. "Tell me when and where." "Tomorrow, 8 p.m. at the park," I said firmly, giving him no room for negotiation. "All right," he said after a pause. "I'll be there." The next evening, I arrived at the park early. The air was cold, the kind that bites at your skin and makes your breath visible. The playground was deserted, the swings creaking in the wind, and the distant hum of traffic filled the silence. I paced near the picnic tables, my thoughts a tangled mess of anger, sadness, and dread. Ryan arrived a few minutes later, his figure illuminated by the dim glow of the streetlights. He looked worn, his usual confident stride replaced with hesitant steps. His hands were shoved deep into his jacket pockets, and he stopped a few feet away from me, his posture guarded. "Chris," he began, his voice subdued. "Thanks for meeting me. I didn't bother with pleasantries." "Cut the crap, Ryan," I snapped. "I want the truth. What the hell were you thinking?" He flinched at my tone but nodded, his shoulders sagging. "You're right. I owe you the truth," he said. "It started out innocent, I swear. I was just helping Lauren with her workouts. She was making real progress, and I was proud of her." "Proud?" I spat, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "That's the best you've got?" "I know how it sounds," he said quickly, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "But it's the truth. At first, it was all about the workouts. But then, she started opening up to me. About how lonely she was, how distant things had gotten between you two." My fists clenched at his words, the urge to hit him barely contained. "And instead of telling her to talk to me, you decided to swoop in and be the hero?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage. "It wasn't like that," Ryan said, his voice rising. "I didn't plan for this to happen, Chris. It just did. I didn't mean to hurt you." I let out a bitter laugh, the sound harsh and foreign even to my own ears. "You didn't mean to hurt me?" I repeated. "You were supposed to be my friend, Ryan, my brother, and you did this?" He looked down, his shame evident. "I know," he said quietly. "I know I messed up. I'll never forgive myself for it." The anger burned hot in my chest, but beneath it was something colder, heavier. "You know what hurts the most?" I asked, my voice breaking. "It's not just that you betrayed me. It's that you thought I wouldn't find out, that you thought so little of me." Ryan's head snapped up, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. "That's not true," he said quickly. "Chris, you have to believe me. Nothing physical ever happened. It was emotional, yes, but it never went beyond that." "And I'm supposed to believe you?" I asked bitterly. "After everything?" "I don't know," he admitted, his voice cracking, "but I'm telling you the truth. I swear." I stared at him, my mind racing. Could I believe him? Should I? His words felt sincere, but sincerity didn't erase the betrayal, the broken trust. "Why, Ryan?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why her? Why my wife?" "I don't have an answer for that," he said, his shoulders slumping. "I wish I did. I wish I could take it all back." The weight of his words settled over me like a heavy fog. I wanted to scream, to hit him, to make him feel the pain he'd caused. But instead, I turned away, my chest heaving with the effort to keep my emotions in check. "I need time," I said finally, my voice hollow. "And I need you to stay the hell out of my life." Ryan nodded, his expression filled with regret. "I understand," he said quietly, "and I'm sorry. For everything." I didn't respond, walking away without looking back. Each step felt heavier than the last, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. When I got home, Lauren was sitting on the couch, her face pale and tear-streaked. She looked up as I entered, her eyes filled with both hope and fear. "Did you talk to him?" she asked softly. "I did," I said, my tone flat. "He admitted to everything." Her shoulders sagged, and she nodded. "Chris, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "For everything." I sat down across from her, the weight of the confrontation still pressing on me. "I need to know one thing," I said, my voice firm. "Do you still want this? Us?" Lauren's tears spilled over as she nodded. "More than anything," she said. "I'll do whatever it takes, Chris. Therapy, counseling, whatever you need. Just tell me what I can do." I stared at her, my emotions a tangled mess of anger, sadness, and something else I couldn't quite name. "I don't know what I need," I admitted. "But if we're going to try, you need to be honest with me. About everything. I will, she promised, her voice cracking. No more lies. No more secrets. The silence between us was heavy, but for the first time in days, it felt like there might be a sliver of hope. The next few days felt like walking through a minefield, each conversation with Lauren a delicate dance between honesty and avoidance. She tried. I could see that. Every word she said seemed carefully chosen, every action deliberate, as if she were trying to piece together the shattered trust between us. But no matter how hard she worked, the wound was still fresh, and I couldn't ignore the lingering ache in my chest. For my part, I was distant. I knew I wasn't being fair, but I couldn't help it. The betrayal had cracked something deep inside me, and I didn't know how to put it back together. One evening, Lauren approached me as I sat on the porch, nursing a beer and staring out at the fading light. "Chris," she began hesitantly, her voice soft, "I've been looking into counseling. For us." I didn't respond immediately, taking a long sip instead. "And you think that'll fix this?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. "It's not about fixing it," she said quickly, sitting down beside me. "It's about understanding it. About figuring out how we got here, and if we can move forward." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time, I allowed myself to consider them. Maybe counseling wouldn't fix us, but it might at least help me make sense of the chaos in my mind. The first session was awkward. The therapist, a calm, middle-aged woman with kind eyes, welcomed us into her office and asked us to share why we were there. Lauren spoke first, her voice trembling but earnest. "I made a mistake," she admitted, glancing at me before looking back at the therapist. "A terrible mistake that hurt the person I love most. I don't expect forgiveness overnight, but I want to work toward it." Her words stung, but there was a sincerity in her tone that made me pause. When it was my turn, I struggled to find the right words. "I don't know if this can be fixed," I said finally, "but I owe it to myself to try." Over the next few weeks, the sessions became a routine. We talked about the good times, the bad times, and everything in between. The therapist encouraged us to be brutally honest, even when it hurt. And it did hurt. Hearing Lauren talk about her loneliness, her feelings of invisibility, made me question whether I'd been as present as I thought. But it also forced her to confront the choices she'd made and the damage they'd caused. Between sessions, Lauren made an effort to show her commitment. She left me notes, small tokens of apology and love. She asked about my day, something she hadn't done in months, and made an effort to reconnect with the parts of my life she drifted away from. One evening, after a particularly emotional session, she sat across from me at the dining table, her hands folded tightly in front of her. "Chris," she began, her voice steady but soft, "I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. Even when I made the worst mistake of my life, you were always the person I wanted to be with." I looked at her, the weight of her words pressing down on me. "Then why?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why did you do it?" She took a deep breath, her eyes glistening with tears. "Because I was scared," she admitted. "Scared that you didn't love me anymore. Scared that I was losing you. And instead of facing that fear, I ran from it, into something I thought would make me feel whole again. But it didn't. It just made everything worse." Her honesty cut deep, but it also gave me something I hadn't expected, understanding. It didn't excuse her actions, but it made them feel less like a deliberate betrayal and more like the result of two people losing their way. As the weeks turned into months, I began to see small shifts in our relationship. The laughter that had once felt forced started to come naturally. The silences, once heavy with unspoken pain, grew lighter. Lauren's efforts didn't wane. If anything, they deepened. And slowly, I found myself opening up again, allowing her back into the parts of my life I'd walled off. But trust wasn't something that came easily. There were moments when I'd catch her glancing at her phone or coming home late, and the doubt would creep in. She noticed, and instead of brushing it off, she'd address it head-on. "I know it's going to take time," she said one evening after I questioned a late-night work call. "And I'll do whatever it takes to prove that you can trust me again." One of the biggest hurdles came when Ryan tried to reach out. He sent me a long email, apologizing again and asking if we could meet. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity before finally deleting the message. I wasn't ready to face him, and maybe I never would be. Forgiving Lauren was hard enough. Forgiving Ryan felt impossible. Lauren never brought him up, which I appreciated. It was as if she understood that the wound was still too fresh, the betrayal too raw. Instead, she focused on us, on the life we were trying to rebuild. One afternoon, as we cleaned out the garage, I found an old photo album buried beneath a pile of forgotten belongings. Flipping through it, I saw images of us in happier times, vacations, family gatherings, quiet moments at home. Lauren leaned over my shoulder, her smile bittersweet as she pointed out her favorite memories. "We were so happy," she said softly. "We were," I agreed, my voice quiet. "Do you think we can get back to that?" she asked, her tone tentative. I hesitated, my fingers brushing over a photo of us on our wedding day. "I think we can try," I said finally, "but it's going to take time." Her smile was small but genuine, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a start, and sometimes that was enough. Months turned into a year, and the storm that had once threatened to consume us began to calm. It wasn't easy, far from it. Every day brought its own challenges, moments where doubt crept in or old wounds reopened. But slowly, steadily, Lauren and I began to find a rhythm again. Therapy remained a cornerstone of our progress. The sessions forced us to confront uncomfortable truths, to strip away the layers of resentment and guilt that had built up between us. Lauren's honesty, raw and unfiltered, was both painful and healing. She didn't shy away from the hard questions, nor did she make excuses for her actions. Instead, she owned them, and in doing so, she gave me the space to begin letting go. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lauren reached for my hand. "Chris," she began, her voice steady, "I need to ask you something." I turned to her, my chest tightening. "What is it? Do you think we'll ever be okay again?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. I didn't answer right away, letting her question settle in the air. "I think we're getting there," I said finally, "but it's not something that happens overnight. It's something we have to work at, every day." She nodded, her grip on my hand tightening. "I'm willing to do that," she said softly, "for as long as it takes." Despite the progress we'd made, there were still moments of tension. Ryan's name, though unspoken, hung over us like a shadow. I hadn't seen or spoken to him since the confrontation at the park, and I'd made it clear to Lauren that I didn't want him in our lives. She respected that, never mentioning him or their past connection. It was a silent agreement, one that helped us move forward. But moving forward didn't mean forgetting. There were times when the memory of their betrayal would surface, sharp and unrelenting. In those moments, I leaned on the tools therapy had given me: communication, patience, and the understanding that healing wasn't linear. One of the biggest milestones came when Lauren and I decided to renew our vows. It wasn't a grand gesture, nor was it about erasing the past. Instead, it was a quiet acknowledgement of everything we'd been through and a commitment to the life we were trying to rebuild. We stood in our backyard, surrounded by close friends and family, the late afternoon sun casting a warm glow over the scene. Lauren's voice trembled as she spoke, her words filled with sincerity and hope. "Chris," she began, her eyes locked on mine, "I know I've hurt you in ways I can never fully repair, but I promise to spend every day proving to you that my love is real, that it's strong enough to withstand anything. Thank you for giving me a second chance. I won't waste it." Her words brought tears to my eyes, and as I slipped the ring back onto her finger, I felt a weight lift, a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. Life didn't magically become perfect after that day, but it felt lighter. We found joy in the small things: cooking dinner together, taking weekend trips, laughing at old inside jokes. It was as if we were rediscovering each other, not as the people we'd been, but as the people we were becoming. Lauren threw herself into her work, channeling her energy into projects that reignited her passion. I, too, found myself growing in unexpected ways, exploring hobbies I'd long neglected and deepening connections with friends I'd pushed away during the turmoil. But the most significant change was how we communicated. The walls we'd once built between us were gone, replaced by a vulnerability that made us stronger. Lauren didn't hide her feelings anymore, and I didn't retreat into silence. We argued, we disagreed, but we always came back to the table, willing to listen and understand. One evening, as we sat by the fire pit in the backyard, Lauren looked over at me, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think we're better now?" she asked, her voice quiet. "Better?" I repeated, tilting my head. "In some ways, yes. In others, I think we're still figuring it out." She smiled, a mix of sadness and gratitude. "I think that's okay," she said. "Figuring it out, I mean, as long as we're doing it together." And we were. Together. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the pain, we'd found a way to rebuild. Not the life we'd had, but something new, something stronger. As the fire crackled and the stars began to emerge, I reached for her hand, the warmth of her touch grounding me. "We're not perfect," I said, "but I think we're going to be okay." Lauren's smile widened, and for the first time in a long time, I believed it.